It all begins when portals appeared and monsters came out spreading chaos, and then the hunters awakened. 7 hunters created noble families, but one guy reached the top without any divine help, all on his own. The protagonist became famous in the East as a miracle warrior who walked alongside shadowy skulls. But the noble families and the stars soon decided his existence was a great threat to the established order. With that, we see an entire city being consumed by raging flames, as if it were a real inferno. Many warriors were defeated, as they were sent there just to take down the invincible hero. Then, the famous magic family made their grand entrance with a huge banner in the middle of the chaotic scene. The protagonist was on the ground, holding a broken watch, while he was badly hurt in the chaos. He was struggling to breathe, and his face showed the extreme exhaustion from the grueling battle. Even kneeling and with a missing arm, the warrior still kept a steady gaze on his opponent. Filled with rage, the young man cries out against the old mage named Dmitri for causing all that destruction. The enemy sat atop the rebel, arrogantly watching the disaster unfold. This mage was the embodiment of a powerful deity, and he mocked the unfortunate fate of the unprotected young man. The boy coughs weakly, and then questions why they're trying to get rid of him. He asks if the problem was his lack of a deity, or because he refused to join the nobles. The old man laughs and confirms both, saying the gods hate anyone who can become strong on their own. Then the old man states that the immortal king has power that rivals all of them, and that frightens the others. The young man thinks that excuse is complete nonsense, and keeps his furious glare on the sorcerer. But his opponent explains that undead magic breaks the world's rules and offends the natural order. Then the mage begins to glow with a golden light, saying the heavens have abandoned the shadow warrior. The young man mocks the old man for hiding behind celestial power, and warns him that he's been quiet for a reason. At that moment, he raises his hand, and a powerful dark energy begins to emanate from his battered body. Numerous bones scattered on the ground begin to tremble and glow with that same eerie purple aura. A whirlwind of dark magic sweeps through the area, showing that the hunter still had a few tricks up his sleeve. He then casts a secret technique, creating a huge domain of despair around the observing enemy. The old man quickly realizes this ability drains spirits as an army of skeletons begins to rise. Impressed by his remaining strength, the old man decides he'll also use his most destructive spell. The sorcerer summons the great eye of his deity and fires a golden beam down toward the ground. The protagonist looks up, surprised by the absurd attack coming straight to erase him from existence. The young man quickly realizes that if his shadow barrier can't take the impact, it'll be all over for him. A huge sphere of red light explodes with destructive and overwhelming energy. With that, a beam of power shoots toward the hunter at high speed, without hesitation. Even in what seems to be his final moments, the young man smiles and decides to risk it all on one last try. The old mage is shocked, not understanding the reason for that smile at a time like this. Then, the protagonist reveals a golden pocket watch he'd been holding in his hand. He then points the artifact at the spell, saying the item can interfere with time. A message appears, saying the object will return to the past because the requirements have been met. Then, a golden light erupts as time begins to reverse for the warrior. He explains that he didn't have a divine power, but he realized he could take the enemies. This way, the hunter uses the watch to absorb the mage's attack. As the old man watches in astonishment, Mitri becomes desperate and yells, asking what on earth the immortal king was doing. The young man says he's going to borrow the divine power the old man was so proud of. With a confident smile, the young man promises that next time, he will crush the noble families. Right after that, the hands of the watch begin to spin backward rapidly. Then a very bright light fills the scene, taking the hunter's consciousness with it. After the flash, the first thing he sees is the ceiling of a simple, modern room. The protagonist wakes up startled in his bed, his whole body feeling very confused. He quickly puts a hand on his chest, feeling his heart beating fast as he looks around. But the warrior notices something familiar and recognizes that this was the house where he used to live. The place was the same, with the TV, the fridge, and all the furniture he remembered. Sitting on the bed, he looks at the watch and wonders if his plan really worked. Filled with anger, The young man vows to make the mage Dimitri pay for everything that happened. Then a blue screen shows that the watch is now broken and cannot be used again. Even so, the hunter smiles because his risky bet paid off in the end. He remembers that this was the day the system appeared, almost 10 years ago. Soon, a status screen shows his name and his level 1 stats as a beginner. The system then asks the young man to choose a starting class from 3 options. He notices that in the beginning, only the most basic classes are available for players. This time, the young man decides he won't rush and will survive at all costs. With that, the protagonist gets up and puts on a jacket, ready to use his knowledge. The young man heads to a large building known as the Natsuhabara Hunter Market. Inside, a friendly employee greets him with a welcome and a warm smile. The attendant starts talking about the items, but he interrupts her and asks for a rare ring. The saleswoman is clearly confused by the young man's question and gives him a strange look. She says that item is cursed, but the young man replies that he already knows and wants the price. Shortly after, the protagonist walks through the market after making his purchase at the store. The employee still asks if he really wants to buy it, despite all the risks. Opening the box, he knows that a cursed item like this wouldn't be worth that much. A blue screen shows the details of the Ring of Lesser Darkness and its terrible curse. Even knowing about the curse, he puts on the ring because he knows how to handle that problem. A dark aura appears because for those who resist, the item grants the power of necromancy. With a wicked smile, he feels the dark energy flowing through his entire body now. Suddenly, he's transported to a dark and gloomy place, like an endless void. Inside, he faces the ring's curse head, on without showing a hint of fear. The curse manifests as a golden vision of his arch enemy, Dimitri the Mage. The protagonist faces the image of the old man, unfazed by his imposing presence. The ghost of the mage taunts him, saying he's been abandoned by the stars in the sky. The golden apparition extends a hand to launch its power against the young man's mind. The enemy says that even after returning to the past, he will never be able to truly defeat him. With that, a massive attack of light rains down on the young man to break his spirit. He smirks as the system blocks the mental attack from the ring's curse. The attack is repelled by his passive skill called Clear Mind, which protects him. A new message appears, saying he successfully passed the ring's test. With the victory, the dark scenery begins to shatter around him, and everything vanishes. The necromancer's power finally awakens, and a blue flame appears in his eye. A dark aura surrounds him, and he says he will create an army to rival the gods. The ring he's wearing evolves from rare to epic after he overcomes the curse. With a satisfied smile, he now holds his new dark ring on his finger. Then, the system opens the class screen, and he can choose from 4 options. He then taps on the necromancer option, the class that channels power from souls. Then a purple aura surrounds him, and the class symbol appears in front of him. The hunter gains the passive ability, Guide of the Departed, which will help him greatly. Satisfied with his new power, he says he's off to a good start now. But looking at the skills screen, he realizes he only has 2 for now. The first raises the fallen, and the second is for controlling bones at will. The young man thinks that even with his knowledge, he can't use strong skills yet. He knows that following the system's rules won't lead him to maximum power. Becoming a necromancer this early was good, but it won't be enough for him. To defeat Mitri, he's going to need the power of an ancient constellation. With a plan in mind, the young man takes a plane and travels to a distant island. His destination is the famous and ancient temple of Cronus, the great god of time. There reside the constellations that lost their light after the defeat against Zeus. The titans who accepted the outcome could still act as deities. The warrior stands before an ancient stone tome in that place. He remembers that the owner of the broken watch was one of these fallen gods. So, it's time to find this so-called constellation that is imprisoned. Without hesitation, he smashes the pocket watch on top of that ancient altar. A very strong golden light begins to emanate from the pieces of the artifact. With that, the ground shakes and the scenery around him completely shatters. The young man is taken to a huge hall with a beautiful stained glass window in the background. He looks around, and a mysterious voice asks who is in the chamber. A giant entity appears, furious, asking who dares to disturb it. But the hunter just smirks, showing no fear of the god. He then greets the god Cronus, the dethroned king of all titans. The deity of time stares at him with a serious and suspicious look, and the young man continues to hold the remains of the watch that brought him there. The titan then asks if it was the little human who managed to go back in time. With a smile, the young man confirms the deed, showing the remains of the watch. The entity praises him but questions why he was awakened from his slumber. He reminds him that Cronus lost everything to Olympus and is now just a forgotten name. With a wicked smile, the young man asks if the ancient god doesn't want revenge. The god is surprised and, with a serious look, asks the young man to repeat what he said. The hunter proposes that the god become his constellation to get his revenge. Angrily, Cronus says that a human could never help a god with their revenge. The young man continues to hold the broken watch in his hand during the conversation. He reveals that he already reached the 9-star rank on his own, and Zeus is on his list. In addition, all 7 great noble families are also his enemies now. By destroying them, Olympus would lose its influence. But Cronus finds this ambition small. The god notes that even after regressing, he chose the path of a necromancer. The young man says that might be true for the god of time, but not of the harvest. An ancient image shows that Cronus actually rules over both time and the harvest. His scythe is the symbol of the reaper, and both defy the natural order of the world. The titan becomes furious with his audacity and tells the human not to be so arrogant. The floor of that sacred place begins to tremble with the fury of the ancient deity, but the hunter shouts that this wasn't the time to care about that. He asks if the god is going to live forever without his name and his divine power. The young man continues to taunt him, saying he would become weaker than Olympus. With that, he invites him to reclaim his power and destroy Olympus once and for all. In his thoughts, the young man knows that if his plan fails, he's in big trouble. With a smile, Cronus admits he never forgot his desire for revenge. The deity then decides to test if the boy can be the power behind it. Changing his divine nature will be a process of agony and pain for the young man. If he can endure the ordeal, the god promises to become his constellation. The protagonist is shocked to realize the test is starting right now. With that, Cronus extends his hand and names him as his new saint and representative. The hunter is stunned and speechless upon hearing he's become the saint of a god. A golden aura surrounds the young man's body as he receives the constellation's sacred power, but the power of darkness and the sacred energy begin to conflict within him. He knows that if he passes out now, he'll lose his only chance to have a god by his side. Cronus just observes the young man's test of endurance with a cold, imposing look. Despite the intense pain, the hunter strives not to give in to the pressure of that power. With great determination, he forces himself to endure the divine ordeal to the end. After some time, we see the protagonist walking across the clean floor of an airport. He finally returns to Japan after successfully completing his trip. With a confident smile, the young man says Japan is the best place in the world. Just then, a small version of Cronus appears and asks if the world has changed much. The god floats around his new saint, commenting on the passage of time. A screen says a new star has appeared in the pantheon. The Reaper has become the blue giant. The young man teases the god, saying he talks a lot for someone who can't give blessings. He thinks that even without power or followers, the deity seems quite happy about this. The Titan returned using the concept of the Reaper, but needs a reputation to gain power. Still, after an eternity of being trapped, it's natural for him to be so excited now. The god tells the young man to spread his name, and the hunter finds himself in a unique situation. He reflects that the saint class is the strongest, and Cronus turned him into a priest. His new class is the Saint of the White Knight, which has no penalties for necromancy. He can also convert sacred power into spiritual power and can use life drain. The young man realizes that using sacred and necromancer powers at the same time is rare. He thinks that using both abilities at once is a very broken power. The god says a saint is a representative, and the young man understands it was all calculated. The deity boasts about having been the king of the gods, and the warrior becomes thoughtful. With a smile, the young man decides that the Furujuku portal is a good choice. The ancient garden is a perfect place to test all his new powers. These portals that appeared in the world connect the Earth to other dimensions. They are classified as fluid and disappear when the dungeon boss is defeated. But fixed-type portals, like the Ancient Garden, exist forever. The garden is a 1-star portal, so it's easy for rookie hunters to enter. In front of the portal, several hunters are looking for a party to enter the dungeon. Our protagonist just observes all the activity with a serious look. Just then, a group approaches him and invites him to join them on the mission. But the young man refuses the invitation right away and continues on alone to the portal. The hunter who called him is a bit embarrassed, but understands his decision. Then a member of the group questions if the rookie will be okay in there alone. The girl on the team tells them not to worry, since it was his choice to go solo, but the warrior knows that at this level, he can handle himself just fine alone. With that, he enters the dungeon, and a screen announces that he's in the Ancient Garden. He walks calmly through the forest and notices that the place is very quiet. He soon understands this is the classic setup for a surprise attack. With a smile on his face, the young man realizes his first prey is already near. Suddenly, he looks up and sees a monster leaping toward him with everything it has. The small creature was a goblin that charges at him with a dagger. The monster tries to hit him with a quick strike, but the young man dodges it easily. The goblin then lets out a high-pitched scream as its body glows with an aura. The hero uses his ability and converts his spiritual power into sacred power. Then, the system screen shows all the details of his life drain skill. He activates the ability and sucks the life force from the goblin, which screams in pain. The hunter realizes that using both types of power feels quite similar in the end. With his hands on the monster's chest, he continues to drain all of its energy. A greenish aura surrounds him as he finishes his new technique there. Soon, the dried-up body of the goblin falls to the ground, and his base stats have increased. He gets excited seeing his attributes rise when he uses life drain. He then notes that the bonus for leveling up is 5 status points. With that, taking out 25 goblins is the same as him leveling up once. After the hunt, little Cronus appears floating beside his contractor. The deity asks if he liked the power, and the young man confirms it's incredible. The god shows off proudly, and the young man admits he was right about that. Now that he has a body, he gets ready and says the show is about to really begin. A green energy comes out of the defeated goblin's eyes as the spell starts to work. With a wicked smile, he activates the skill and commands the body to answer his call. Then, a skeletal hand with a dark aura begins to rise from the ground. The goblin's body then begins to slowly levitate under the effect of necromancy. Little by little, the creature rises from the ground, its appearance completely changed. The hunter is satisfied to see his new minion standing and ready to obey. The system announces that the zombie's rate is high and its stats have increased by 97%. The monster is now a 1-star undead, ready for battle. With his new servant, he believes he can handle the work in the garden alone. So he and his new zombie companion head deeper into the forest together, but suddenly, a group of 3 goblins emerges from the woods with weapons in hand. The creatures soon spot the young man with his minion and prepare to attack. The young man thinks the situation is perfect for a test and sends his servant to charge the enemy. The zombie then dashes toward the other goblins at high speed without hesitation. It lands a solid punch right in the face of one of the enemies, breaking all its teeth. The other 2 goblins stab it in the back, but the zombie doesn't even feel the attack. Another monster tries a side slash, but the undead creature remains standing. The goblins are frightened, and the hero explains that stabbing a zombie won't take it down. Meanwhile, he takes advantage of the distraction and grabs one of the goblins by the neck. The young man lifts it and uses life drain to absorb its vital energy. His minion lands a powerful kick on the other goblin, sending it flying far away. The zombie turns and punches the last monster that was still standing. With savagery, the creature bites the enemy's neck without any mercy. The warrior stands over a body and wonders if he can drain its strength. He tests the skill and sees that it works on fallen bodies, and his stats increase again. With a confident smile, he decides it's now time to pick up the pace. There's a saying that defeating the first enemy is half the battle. In other words, the hardest part is always creating the first undead. The young man uses his magic and orders all the other bodies to answer his call. 4 more zombies rise with high stats, ready to obey him. With a satisfied smile, He knows this is what he really wanted. His new zombies charge forward, and he confirms that being a necromancer is the best. The undead creatures soon surround the other goblins in a brutal attack. One of the zombies is stabbed, but it doesn't even feel the enemy's blow. The little goblin panics. When it sees attack had no effect, the monster screams in fear as it faces its end for the first time. Then, the undead servant savagely bites the enemy to finish it off. Cronus appears and says the contractor should fight with more dignity, but the young man says this is how necromancers fight and tells him to get used to it. He reaches the limit of 20 controllable undead at the same time. With his magic, he prepares to absorb the energy from the fallen bodies. Then the hunter forms a small army of zombies to help him there. Right after, he sends his minions running into the forest. Suddenly, a fire arrow from an archer flies toward the monsters. One of the goblins is hit squarely by the surprise attack and lets out a scream. The protagonist stops his servants and becomes alert to the new presence. He then tells the person to stop hiding and show themselves at once. Slowly, the mysterious hunters emerge from behind the trees in the woods. The group that invited him before appears and asks who he really is. Cronus is curious, and the young man recognizes those people from his past. He remembers they are the famous twin shadow hunters. The young man reveals that they were the ones who tried to eliminate him before his regression. The girl's name is Yuka Rendo, and she is a very skilled archer, and her brother's name is Yuma Rendo, and he is a very strong warrior. The young man comments that they don't seem as strong as he remembered. He notices they are still 1 star, and now have 1 more member. He decides not to attack them, as they only accepted a job in the past. One of the twins then asks if he is the one controlling the zombie. The hero knows that the necromancer class isn't well known around here yet. He confirms the undead are his servants and shows them off with pride. The young man gets a brilliant idea as he looks at the group of hunters. He thinks he needs carriers and that they probably just want money. With that, he approaches the trio and offers them a job, leaving the leader confused. He proposes that they collect the magic stones for an 80-20 split. The 3 hunters look at each other in silence, seeming very suspicious of the proposal. The forest around them remains calm as the group discusses the offer. The archer and the other guy tell the leader not to trust the strange necromancer. Our hero just watches calmly from a distance, waiting for their decision. He finds their discussion quite noisy and continues to wait for the final answer. The group's leader then shouts that he accepts the deal, surprising his companions. But he asks for a 50-50 split in return to be more fair. The hunter offers 70-30 as a final proposal, and the other reluctantly accepts. The guy from the team asks if their senpai is sure this is a good idea. The leader explains that if the guy wanted to, they'd already be lifeless on the ground. He believes that following the young man will earn them much more money than usual. After some time hunting, one of the guys feels completely exhausted. He falls to the ground asking for a break because he can't collect any more stones. The archer also sits down against a tree, saying she's at her absolute limit. The group's leader looks at the mountain of stones they managed to gather. He knew from the beginning that this hunter was no ordinary guy. The hunt went far beyond what he imagined, and the necromancer cleared everything. The hero points to more bodies, saying they are very profitable there. Tired, the group's leader asks if they can't take a short break, but the hunt continues, and his zombies take down another goblin without mercy. He then points to another body and tells them to go over there to collect. With a smile, he tells them not to rush, leaving the hunter speechless. The 3 are now certain that this guy is not a normal human being. After a while, the young man says, "It looks like they've cleared the whole area." With the mission accomplished, he decides to take a look at his current stats. A screen shows that all his attributes have increased significantly after the hunt. He is satisfied because his stats went up by 212 in 3 hours. Now that his level has increased, the young man heads deeper into the forest. It was time to go after the dungeon boss to finish things up. But soon a group of stronger goblins with a shaman appears in his path. The creature's leader says a foolish human has finally arrived in his domain. The protagonist scoffs, saying an idiotic goblin thinks he's the king of the place. The female hunter warns him that he's the southern chief, and it's better not to provoke him. With a glowing eye, the monster orders its servants to bring the human to his knees. The horde of goblins charges with full force, and the chief orders them to devour the young man. But the young man remains calm, as his army of zombies is ready for action. One of the undead minions charges forward, but ends up being surprised by the enemy. The monster then manages to stab the zombie in a quick and accurate attack. The blow pierces through the servant's body, which falls to the ground. The system announces that the number of active familiars has decreased to 19. With a cold look, the necromancer commands the fallen body to answer his call. A skeletal hand soon emerges from within the goblin that was just defeated. The new zombie rises, and his number of minions returns to 20 again. The newly created undead then attacks its former horde companions. Without hesitation, it bites another goblin's neck in a very savage scene. The group is shocked to see him turn the bodies into his servants. The shaman prepares to use its magic and grabs an item from its waist. It raises a skull staff and begins to cast a powerful spell. Then, the monster slams the staff on the ground, and a totem of courage inspires the goblins. The creatures get stronger, and their eyes glow with a red power. The chief boasts that his totem weakens enemies and strengthens allies. But a zombie shatters the totem, and the young man asks what that thing on the ground was. The monster turns in shock, unable to believe what just happened. Full of rage, it yells that a mere human destroyed its sacred totem. At that moment, the hunter's zombies place several staves on the ground. One of the creatures then uses a staff to forcefully attack another goblin. The hero's zombie then blocks the other monster's attack with the bone staff. The monster is surprised, not expecting its strike to be stopped. With a smile, the young man mocks the shaman and asks if he's frustrated. The goblin chief becomes furious and grips his bone staff tighter. He then activates the Curse of Madness, and a red aura appears in the area. The spell affects the trio of hunters, who feel a strong headache. With that, the goblins get stronger, and their attributes increase by 50. The now stronger monsters attack the zombies, and one of them is quickly defeated. The goblin horde continues the onslaught, and the number of servants keeps decreasing. In a short time, the young man's army is reduced to just 10 zombies. Soon, the ground is littered with undead bodies, and only 8 of them remain. The young man realizes the staff was that goblin chief's trump card. The shaman boasts that his staff is made from the grudges of goblins. But the young man notices an important detail and realizes the weapon is made of bone. With a smile, he understands that victory will now be much easier. He then activates his bone control ability to turn the tables. The chief is confused as his staff begins to tremble for no reason. Right after that, the weapon is ripped from his hands by an invisible force. The hero now holds the chief's weapon, and the curse in the area is broken. The monster is in shock and asks what on earth the human just did. With the curse broken, the goblins suddenly become weaker. He then uses bone control to manipulate the skull on the staff. The young man notes that the reaction speed is better because of the grudges. With a smile, he says the monster can have its weapon back. Then, he throws the staff with full force toward the startled chief. The creature is frozen in fear, unable to react to the attack. The staff then pierces through the goblin's chest with overwhelming force. The monster looks down and sees the skull of its weapon in its chest. It falls to the ground lifeless, and the young man uses life drain on its body. Since it was a boss, the power he absorbs is much greater than usual. Suddenly, the protagonist turns with a slightly surprised look on his face. Then, the group of hunters stares back at the young man, not understanding anything. He then kneels and begins to collect the goblin chief's blood in a vial. He forgot that life drain had almost used up all the fallen monster's blood. With that, he leaves the cleanup to the trio, and the leader hesitantly agrees. The hunters look at the field full of bodies, unable to believe it all. Soon, the scene changes, and we're back in a very modern city. Then the young man's foot finally steps out of the bright blue portal. He is now back in the real world after finishing his mission in the dungeon. The trio follows him out, looking exhausted and carrying a huge backpack. The crowd is shocked by the amount of stones and doubts that it was just the 4 of them. The young man congratulates the trio and suggests selling the stones at a shop in Natsuabara. But the leader says that for a fair price, It's better for them to sell the materials themselves. The hero questions if he can trust people he just met today. The group is upset, but he says it was just a joke to tease them. He then asks how much they think they'll earn, and the answer is 6 million. At that moment, the young man takes the skull staff from their backpack. He comments that the weapon will probably be cheap, and the leader doesn't understand. The staff is cursed and only for priests, giving spiritual power and confusion. The young man explains that priests can't use spiritual power, so it's useless to them. With that, he decides he'll keep the staff, and the leader is very surprised. The young man confirms and asks them to deduct the value when they settle the accounts, but the leader refuses, as they would have never gotten the item on their own anyway. The hero asks if the other two agree, and they say they follow the leader. With a smile, he thinks that's exactly what he likes about that team. He arranges for them to enter the dungeon again, and the group eagerly accepts. The next day, they enter the ancient garden again for another hunt. The protagonist watches his zombie defeat another goblin with ease. With a serious look, he turns to the group and asks if they can still go on. The trio is collapsed on the ground in exhaustion, surrounded by bodies and magic stones. The group's leader says he can't take it anymore, and that their bags are already full. So the young man tells them to go on ahead, and the hunter agrees with relief. The protagonist, now alone, continues to walk through the forest with his army. Cronus questions why he sent them back, and he asks if it was that obvious. He explains that he doesn't want anyone to see what will happen from here on out. With that, he heads to the northern part of the ancient garden, a darker place. The vegetation there is denser, and the atmosphere is much heavier than in the rest of the portal. Suddenly, some red eyes glow from within the bushes of that forest. A horde of frogmen with spears leaps toward the young man to attack him. He then commands his army of zombies to advance, and the great battle begins. One of the minions bites one of the frogmen hard, filling it with venom. Another monster looks at its fallen companion in shock and gets distracted for a moment. A zombie stabs it from behind, but the frogman manages to counter the attack. The number of servants starts to decrease as the creatures are much stronger. The frogmen prove to be very difficult opponents and give the zombies a hard time. The hero understands that they have higher stats than the goblins, so it makes sense. He then uses potion control and throws his bone staff with magic. The item hits one of the frogmen, and a system screen opens up right away. The creature's body becomes all oily, and it smiles in a very disgusting way. The young man is a bit unsettled by the frog monster's strange reaction. Then, he lands a powerful kick on the enemy to test his new ability. The staff increases piercing damage with spiritual power infused in it. With that, the young man prepares to finish off the rest of the enemies there. He uses bone control to launch several stakes at the frogmen. He realizes that moving the staff and creating zombies consumes a lot of spiritual power. With the frogs defeated, he prepares to use his necromancy on the bodies. He feels a bit tired but knows he can still handle it. Right after, a huge army of undead frogmen rises. One of the new minions punches a monster that was still standing. With that, a system screen announces that the young man has leveled up to level 6. With a smile, he says he'll soon return to his pre-regression state. He warns that the Sorcerer King can wait, because he'll take care of him soon enough. His objective now is the secret area in the middle of those ancient ruins. With his army and Cronus, he walks toward the center of that mystical place. He then takes out the heart of a frogman that he saved before the fight. Cronus asks what he's going to do, but the young man tells him to be quiet. Then, he pours the goblin shaman's blood over the monster's heart. With the ritual, the heart begins to glow with a strong greenish light. Holding the magical item, he prepares for what is about to happen. With a wicked smile, he says he's going to access a secret area of the portal. The system announces that the secret has been discovered, and he is being moved to another location. Right after that, the hunter is taken to an ancient trial arena. He stops in the middle of the dirt arena and observes the place carefully. The young man remembers finding the place before but couldn't enter at the time. With his servants, he approaches the portal of light in the center of the arena. Suddenly, a giant paw with sharp claws comes out of the portal. The young man is a bit surprised by what just came out of that portal. Then, a screen announces that the trial only allows one person to enter. The system asks him to prove his worth, and the young man prepares for the test. A giant draconian emerges, and the system says the time limit is 10 minutes. That place was created for constellations to choose hunters. Elite soldiers from the dragon's army were placed in the trials there. Cronus doubts his contractor will last even 10 seconds in the trial. The god suggests finding a new saint, and the young man gets very annoyed by that. He says that even if it's a draconian, it should be at a 1-star level. The creature then stomps its foot hard on the ground, preparing for combat. The monster faces the hunter and his small army of frogmen. The young man asks for a moment to modify his minions, leaving the creature confused. He jokes that even villains wait for the hero to transform before a fight. His undead servants look terrified by the modification he's making. The system informs that the undead have been successfully modified using plague blood. They are now plague zombies and can be generated again if the conditions are right. Cronus is shocked by the action, and the young man boasts about having been a 9-star necromancer before. With a smile, he says he's ready for combat and tells the enemy to bring it on. The draconian then faces the army of frauds with a look full of fury and contempt. Without wasting time, the creature charges forward with impressive speed to attack. The new zombies then leap into the air to intercept the giant monster in its path. The plague creatures soon surround the draconian in a coordinated and brutal attack. They cling to the enemy's body, and the beast lets out a roar of pain and anger. One of the minions bites the monster's shoulder hard to fill it with venom. Even with the servants attacking it, the giant remains standing without showing weakness. With a powerful punch, it explodes one of the zombies in a cloud of green blood. The system announces that he has been affected by the zombie's level 12 poison acid. The young man explains that he converted the fraud's strength stats into a powerful poison. The creature becomes furious and starts to brutally crush all the other minions. With a powerful stomp, the arena floor cracks from the force of the blow. The beast lets out a deafening roar and runs toward the hunter with all its might. The young man praises the monster's resilience and uses spiritual power in his staff. With that, he creates an energy shield to protect himself from the draconian's attack. He notes that even with the poison, the enemy's strength is still absurdly high. The shield breaks, and the young man is thrown far away by the impact of the blow. With a victorious roar, the beast prepares to deliver the final blow to the hunter. But the young man activates bone control, and the staff's skull glows with power. The staff flies at high speed and pierces the side of the monster's body. The giant creature screams in pain as it's hit squarely by the surprise attack. Taking advantage of the distraction, he sends his remaining zombies to attack at once. The minions charge and bite the body of the draconian, which is wounded and distracted. The monster roars in anger and pain as the zombies continue to poison it. Soon, the giant's body turns completely black from the frogman's poison. Even poisoned, it still manages to crush one of the zombies with its strength. The draconian then crushes another zombie with its sharp claws without mercy. With a smile, the young man says it was a good fight, but it has now come to an end. Kneeling on the ground, the giant lets out a final roar of pain and despair. The skull staff is then pulled out of the giant creature's body. The hero takes his weapon back. While observing the monster fallen on the ground, he slowly approaches the defeated enemy to finish the combat. With a gesture, he prepares to use one of his strongest abilities. He activates Life Drain and absorbs the remaining energy of the giant monster. The creature falls lifeless, and the system announces that the trial was completed successfully. Cronus praises the victory, and the young man says he was never in danger there. With that, he gains the mark of resistance as a reward for the trial. He smiles with satisfaction, as the new passive mark is a high-level power. The young man looks at the body and says the real reward is something else there. Cronus asks what he's going to do, and the young man prepares to use magic. He thinks that to create a good undead, he will need tools. The scene changes, and we are now in the city of Saitama on a sunny day. The hunter stops in front of an old warehouse with a determined look. He comments that the place hasn't changed at all since before his regression. Suddenly, A fiery explosion happens inside the warehouse, startling him. The young man coughs a bit from the smoke and says that not even that has changed in the end. Then, a young man with light hair also coughs on the other side of the smoke. With a smile on his face, the necromancer knows he has found the right person. The young alchemist emerges from the smoke, not understanding what is happening there. He is Kenya Shinyani, the greatest alchemist in all of Japan at that time. The hero approaches and asks if the young man has a moment to talk. He introduces himself as Ryoga and asks to use the alchemy tools. The alchemist is visibly annoyed by the stranger's sudden request, but the young man says it won't be a win if he just borrows them. He reveals that he knows about the research on the mid-grade healing potion. With that, he offers to help, leaving the alchemist very confused. Inside the laboratory, we see various pieces of equipment and colorful test tubes. On top of a table, there is a large, detailed alchemy cauldron. The alchemist is shocked and wonders how he stabilized the potion. The hero explains that he would have only figured it out on his own in a few years. With a smile, he picks up a scalpel and asks if the other wants to test it. Without hesitation, the young man cuts his own arm with the sharp blade. Right after, he pours the red liquid from the potion onto his cut. The wound heals instantly, and he shows his healed arm, looking very smug. With a smile, the alchemist is amazed by the power of that potion. He asks if it really worked and praises the incredible result. The young scientist tries to grab the test tube to analyze it better, but the necromancer pulls the item away from him with a smirk. He asks if the other is curious about the formula, and he quickly confirms. With a wicked look, the young man asks the other to help him with a favor. He proposes that they work together, and that he will teach him new recipes. In return, the profit split will be 60-40 in the young man's favor. The alchemist thinks that the other has already fallen into his trap, as he predicted. With a wicked smile, the young man says that he is now his new partner. Then, the ring on his hand glows, and he prepares to use necromancy. The body of the giant draconian appears lying on the laboratory floor. The scientist is in shock and asks what on earth that thing is. The young man explains that he is going to process the body because he is a necromancer. He then invites the other to help him in the process of creating the zombie. But the alchemist refuses because they haven't signed any contract yet. He lets him use the space, and the necromancer agrees with a mocking look. The young man explains that the other's distrust is normal because of his past. He had the credit for his work stolen and was forced to resign. The deity complains about the betrayal, and the young man says the gods are all the same. He says the other hesitates because he hasn't yet seen what he's truly capable of. With that, he offers to help so the other can see his power with his own eyes. With a serious look, the young alchemist stares back at the necromancer. He then agrees to the proposal and hands him one of his tools. The hero asks him to melt 5 mana stones in the right proportion. Soon, the young man hands over the ready liquid, and the other is surprised by his speed. The necromancer praises his talent, and the other wonders what he will do. With the liquid in hand, he pours it over the draconian's body on the floor. He explains that he carves formulas and curses into the bones to improve the zombie. For this, he needs to repeat the process of applying the layers several times. The two then begin to work hard and non-stop on the monster's body. The alchemist yells in exhaustion as he continues to grind the items without rest. After a while, the hunter says the long process is finally over. He stretches, and the other shouts that it's actually been 3 days. The scientist wonders who on earth this guy is with so much power and stamina. Even as a 1-star, he moved the heart of a body with just his mana. He understands that the young man defies logic, but his ability is real. The protagonist turns and repeats the proposal of 60-40. The alchemist then accepts the hunter's initial offer without further hesitation. He explains that it would take him 2 years to finish the healing potion alone, but with the young man's help, it's a different story, so he decides to cooperate. With a smirk, the necromancer is satisfied with the result. He says he expects great things from his new alchemist and partner. Now he needs a soul to serve as the core for the fallen dragon. With a plan in mind, the young man takes out his phone and makes a call. He asks if the group received the money and offers them a new job. The scene changes, and we are now in a forest near the border. Suddenly, The group of rookies appears and asks if he called them there. The hunter tells them to follow him, and the trio agrees to the order right away. They walk through the woods, and one of them says the place is dangerous and full of monsters. The hero says he just wanted to pay his respects to an old acquaintance of his. With a watchful eye, he looks for something among the trees of the forest. The group continues to follow the hunter through the tall woods very cautiously. Suddenly, the protagonist stops walking and notices something strange in the air. Right after that, they spot a lone orc on guard in a clearing. The trio warns him that the creature is 2-star and very dangerous, but he decides to test the performance of his new processed bone weapon. With that, he activates bone control, and the weapon launches a blade of energy. The gold bone releases a dark aura and a frightening power. The orc then reacts and throws its spear with all its strength in his direction. The spear flies at high speed to intercept the necromancer's attack. With a smile, he understands that the spear won't stop his magical blow. He scoffs, saying that unfortunately for the monster, the attack won't miss. The bone blade then shatters the spear's tip with absurd force. The blow hits the orca's shoulder, which screams in pain from the attack's impact. The young man says he aimed for the heart, but that the creature has good resilience. The monster then rips the piece of the weapon from its shoulder with great anger. Even wounded, the creature tries to use the rest of the spear to attack the young man. It charges with full force toward the hunter in a last desperate attempt, but the protagonist stands still, waiting for the right moment to counter-attack. Suddenly, a large explosion of fire hits the monster head-on. The group's leader protects himself with a shield, and the hero praises his timing. With a glowing eye, he prepares to use his magic on the enemy again. He then asks how about 3 instead of 1 and activates bone control. 3 bone tentacles soon restrain the wounded orca's body. The stakes pierce the monster in several places, finishing it off for good. With the creature defeated, the two observe the body lying on the forest floor. The group's leader is in shock, unable to believe he defeated the orc. The young man tells them not to stand around, because the real work starts now. The leader asks if he's sure this is the right way to go. He confirms, and his new orc zombie minion rises behind him to follow. The young man explains that the person he's looking for is in that orc village. In the distance, they spot a large village with several guards at the wooden gate. The leader asks if he's sure, as he thought they were going to pay their respects. The necromancer confirms with a "was," as his new orc servant stands by his side. He explains that the person they are looking for is in the monster settlement there. With a wicked smile, the young man says they can make some extra money from this. The trio of hunters is completely shocked by the young man's proposal. As time passes, the sun begins to set on the horizon of that forest. One of the orcs that attacked the group ends up falling lifeless in the middle of the woods. The protagonist then levels up to level 13, and his attributes increase. But the system warns that the absorption limit for that race has been reached. He thinks that he already imagined his ability wouldn't be infinite like that. With that, the hunter decides that for that day, the hunt was over. Back at the camp, he calls one of the female hunters over to talk. He then asks if she is ready, as 3 long days have passed. Soon, night falls, and the full moon illuminates the sky of the dark forest. Inside the tent, the leader says their stats have risen, and they will attack tomorrow. Outside, the trio agrees, and the leader asks the girl to stand watch. They say their goodbyes, and the young man's army of orc zombies stands guard there. 2 of the new minions stand in an alert position to protect the camp. Meanwhile, the 3 hunters sleep peacefully while the hero is away. The protagonist is sitting on a rock, observing the starry sky alone. He has finally leveled up and wants to see the knowledge he has unlocked. With that, the system takes him to the library of the ancient master of the departed. Inside, he approaches one of the books to get the information, but access is denied, and he needs to be level 45 to read it. He gets annoyed because he can only access the beginner necromancer guides. With a sigh, he thinks that it's still better than having nothing. The young man then sits on the floor and begins to read one of the available books. With great attention, he analyzes each page of that ancient magic book. His eyes glow with full focus as he absorbs the knowledge. At dawn, the system announces that a new ability has been learned by him. The next day, one of the hunters from the trio wakes up very lazily and sleepily. But he soon opens his eyes, startled by something that suddenly surprises him. One of the protagonist's orc zombies is staring at him up close with its glowing eyes. The young man gets scared and jumps back as the hero tells him to wake up at once. The group's leader questions the scare, but notices that the monster looks different today. With a smile, the young man says he just made some small improvements to his servants. His army now consists of armored zombies with much greater power and durability than before. The new skill creates bone armor and allows him to manipulate the flesh of the undead. With his new minions, he says it's time to go to the orc settlement. The sun begins to set on the horizon as the group prepares for the big invasion. With that, the team of hunters advances with the army of zombies toward the enemy village. They finally arrive at the orc settlement, which looks like a large fortress. From the top of the tower, one of the guards spots the group and sounds the invasion alarm. Several orcs with spears gather inside the gates, ready to defend the place. But the necromancer extends his hand and prepares to use his bone control there. Then, a strong explosion of energy shatters the wooden gate into several pieces. The guards who were there are thrown far away by the force of that magical attack. With a smile, he holds a bone spear and tells the monsters to stop with the noise. Suddenly, a giant orc with an axe emerges from within the smoke of the explosion. The creature lets out a furious roar as it prepares to attack the group of invaders. From the top of the walls, several orc archers appear and prepare their bows to shoot. A shower of arrows is then fired toward the hunters without any mercy. The group's leader then uses an energy shield to protect everyone from the attack. The team's archer also gets ready, and her crossbow begins to glow with flames. She then fires a flaming arrow that multiplies and hits several enemies. One of the monsters is hit squarely in the chest and screams in pain from the fiery attack. The hero smiles with Cronus by his side and says it wasn't bad at all, as they're just getting started. With that, a horde of orcs rushes toward the invaders to crush them. Then the young man commands his army of armored zombies to advance into combat. One of his minions dashes forward and lands a powerful punch on an enemy's face. Then, the zombie fires a beam of blue energy that hits one of the monsters squarely. With a smile, he finds the result better than expected and says the reading was worth it. The other orcs are completely terrified upon seeing the power of their new enemies, but the young man warns that this was just the beginning of the real battle to come. The horde of orcs then charges with full force toward the necromancer's zombies. One of the minions defends against an orca's blow with its reinforced bone shield. The monster then lands a powerful blow on the zombie's armor with its axe. With that, the system announces that the armor has been damaged and its defense has decreased. He then uses his magic and prepares to repair his servant's armor. Then, the zombie's armor is repaired, and its durability increases again. Right after, he uses Flesh Ripple to pin the enemies to the ground. The flesh then pierces the chest of one of the orcs, who wasn't expecting the attack. The other orcs start to eat the flesh that is on the ground and on their bodies. The group's leader observes everything and is shocked by the young man's intelligent strategy. He realizes that the young man's skill management is on another level. The zombie's flesh sticks to the orc's feet, preventing them from moving. With the enemies trapped, the zombies move back to await the next step. The giant orc chief becomes furious upon seeing his servants being easily defeated. He then begins to release a red aura, and his body starts to change. The system warns that Berserk mode has been activated, and the danger level is critical. With a smile, the hero says the orc chief is finally getting serious. The orc chief unleashes a wild rage, and his body swells with a red power. The system announces that Berserk mode has been activated, and the danger has evolved to a special level. But the hunter smiles, as he was tired of waiting for the monster to fight seriously. With a war cry, the creature swings its axe with all its might to attack. The blow is so powerful it cuts through the air and rushes toward the young man with full force. Unfazed, he extends his hand and activates his bone control ability. With that, enormous bone spikes shoot up from the ground to stop the enemy's attack. The monster is then pierced by several stakes that go through its body, trapping it. The giant creature then falls to its knees, completely immobilized by the attack. It realizes the bones are taking over its body and tries to resist. With a wicked smile, the young man says it's no use as his spiritual power is consumed. The monster screams in agony as the dark magic takes over its entire body. He tells it not to be pessimistic as the power consumption rises to 40%. The young man thinks that using 6 bones at once uses an absurd amount of spiritual power. He knows that if one bone comes loose, the monster will move, and thinks about aiming for the heart. With that, the hunter decides to use bone control again for the final attack. His spiritual power reaches 68, and a bone spear hits the orc. With the direct hit to the chest, the monster finally falls to the ground, defeated and still. The young man is out of breath, as the fight consumed almost all his spiritual energy. He then extends his hand and activates Life Drain to recover his strength. A white aura surrounds him, and his spiritual power recovers to 74. With a confident smile, he feels refreshed and ready for the next battle. The other orcs see their fallen chief and are paralyzed with pure fear at the sight. One of them shouts for everyone to run, and the entire horde begins to flee the village. But the young man won't let them escape, and his eye glows with a green light. He activates Flesh Ripple and traps the feet of the monsters running away. With their feet trapped, the creatures trip and fall on top of each other. Soon, all the orcs who tried to flee are down and immobilized on the field. With a smile, he uses necromancy and raises a new army of armored orcs. And so, the once feared orc chief is now just another figure on the ground. The trio of hunters looks at the fallen monsters and wonders how much money they'll make from this. But the young man picks up the chief's axe and says that it's the real prize of the mission. A screen shows the weapon is the rare blood axe, which gets stronger with blood. With a smile, he says it was worth conquering the orc village in the end. He then hands the weapon to the group's leader and leaves the collecting to them. The hunter agrees and tells the young man to go rest while they take care of everything. With that, the protagonist walks away from the group and heads to another part of the forest. He stops in front of an ancient tree and says he's finally found what he was looking for. The young man then calls out to the hidden person and asks them to come out so they can talk. But the giant tree remains silent and gives no response to the young man. With a sigh, he takes a bone from his bag and prepares to use force. He smiles wickedly as the bone in his hand glows with flames. With his eye glowing, he prepares to strike the tree with the magic bone. He then attacks the tree with all his might, and a green aura surrounds his powerful strike. Then, a dark energy explodes, and he wonders if he has to be aggressive with everyone. A shadowy figure with red eyes appears and asks who dares to disturb it. With a smile, the young man says he's happy to finally meet him for real. He calls him Sora Kashiwaji, the famous magic fighter, and the soul is surprised. The specter asks how the young man knows its name and eyes him with suspicion. The hunter says he knows he stopped a monster wave 35 years ago. A stone cenotaph appears as a memory of the ancient hero's deeds. Sora was a powerful warrior who had the talents of both a mage and a fighter. The soul then smiles and says that it seems his passing wasn't entirely in vain, but the young man comments that not everyone was lucky enough to leave a name behind. The ghost turns serious and asks what the young man means by that statement. He asks if the soul remembers Naruhedo, the vice master of an old guild. A scene shows an entire village being consumed by a giant fire. A man on the radio was desperately calling for backup in the middle of the chaos. He was reporting that there were still civilians in the farming district, surrounded by monsters. The man then shouted his own name into the radio in a final plea for help. He screams in desperation that it's impossible and asks for backup to help him there. But the radio replies that backup is not available and they can't provide support. The man falls silent for a moment with a look of pure disbelief and sadness. He understands they were used as bait, so the others could escape through the north gate. A voice on the radio confirms that thanks to them, the main force managed to escape. The warrior becomes furious because they were sent in knowing there were civilians there. The voice on the other end then asks him not to be so pessimistic about the situation. The one who betrayed him says the honor of stopping the monster wave now belongs to the survivors. Filled with rage, The man smashes the radio on the ground, because if you live, you're a hero. A monster then leaps toward a fallen civilian to finish them off, but the warrior uses dark magic and saves the person from the creature's attack. He then continues to fight to clear a path through the chaos and fire. The man orders his men to protect the civilians and escape from that place. His comrades hesitate for a moment, looking very concerned about him. He then yells in anger that it was an order, and for them to go immediately. The soul explains that the man who sent him to his doom became a great hero. With that, all records related to him were completely erased from history. The protagonist says it's tragic because the one who passed away had his glory stolen. The specter gets furious and tells the young man to stop beating around the bush and get to the point. With a smirk, the young man offers to help the ancient hero get his revenge. The ghost stares at him, its red eyes glowing with hatred and suspicion. The young man proposes they form a contract for him to become a powerful undead. The ancient warrior's soul continues to stare at him in silence, filled with anger. The necromancer repeats the offer and invites him to join him as a servant. Then, the ring on his hand glows with a strong, greenish necromantic energy. He shows the draconian's body and says he has already prepared a vessel for the soul. The ghost looks at the monster's body, seeming very thoughtful about the offer. The soul admits that, in its current state, it hadn't even considered getting revenge on its enemies. He then accepts the offer, but says he has one condition to seal the deal. The ancient hero warns that he will refuse any act that harms innocent people. The young man thinks that the condition is the same as before, and that the hero's heart hasn't changed. Just as expected from a true hero, he thinks with an admiring smile. With that, the young man agrees to the condition and promises he won't break the deal. The soul then accepts the offer and says it will become his undead servant. The system announces that he has acquired possession of the earthbound spirit, Soku Kashiwaji. He remembers that before the regression, he turned the soul into a dread knight. Then, the young man wonders what would have happened if he had given it a strong body from the start. Kronos praises the draconian's body, saying it's a true masterpiece. A screen shows the new servant's status, who is now an incomplete eldritch dragon. The young man gets excited because the magic fighter trait didn't exist in the skeleton knight. The screen explains that the trait combines the aptitudes of a mage and a martial artist. He then asks the new servant how he feels in his dragon body. The creature stretches and says the body is inferior to the one he had in life. The hunter understands the servant is incomplete because of the curse formula used, but he smiles, satisfied, because this was a much better start than before. With his new minion, he turns, and the two of them start walking away from the village. Suddenly, the creature stops him, objecting to being called a minion in a very annoyed tone. At that, the dragon shrinks in size and stands with its arms crossed, looking angry. The hero asks what happened, and the servant says he didn't like being called a minion. The young man suggests using his real name, but the creature says it has already discarded its name. He thinks the servant is quite troublesome, and that his personality has changed a lot. The dragon asks for a name that intimidates opponents, but can't think of a good one. The young man suggests Fafnir, Black Dragon, and Tiamat, but the other one rejects all the names. Annoyed, he tells the servant to call himself Orochi, and the creature immediately refuses again. The hunter wonders if he should just punch him, and the dragon scoffs in disdain. But the creature changes its mind and says the first name, Fafnir, is good enough. The young man sighs exhausted and agrees to call him that before turning to leave. The new Fafnir stops him again and complains that he's practically without any clothes now. He then looks around the orc village, searching for something to wear. The creature grabs a piece of cloth from a tent to use as clothing. The young man wonders if this was the ancient hero's true personality all along. The scene returns to the lab, and the alchemist shouts upon seeing something strange in the night. He gets excited and says the body that was in the solution is now moving. Fafnir says he has obtained a soul, and the scientist goes crazy wanting to study him up close. The dragon thinks the guy is weird and asks if he can punch him, but the young man says no. With a serious look, the protagonist then gets his new partner's attention. He tells the trio they're going back to Tokyo to organize the items. and the group agrees. Back at the lab, the young man prepares to use his necromancer skills. With his magic, he begins to work on the body of the orc's chief he defeated earlier. He sits down and wonders what he should do with that monster's body now. The creature and the scientist watch the young man, waiting to see what he will create. With a wicked smile, he then asks the two of them if they're curious about it. The alchemist panics and says he's not curious at all about the new project. But he can't suppress his curiosity and starts mixing the ingredients. The scientist admits that the young man always manages to exceed his expectations. With a smile, the young man uses flesh separation on the orca's body to prepare it. The magic works, and the monster's flesh slowly begins to separate from its skeleton. Kronos asks if he's going to create another servant, and he says you can never have too much power. The system announces that the completion rate is high, and the skeleton stats will double. The alchemist then hands him an extract to use in the creation of the new servant. The extract gives the skeleton a specialization in defense, and he thinks he can use it. With a smile, he thinks he can use his new creation as a bodyguard. The new skeleton's feet touch the ground, and it prepares to stand up. A 2-star skeleton guard rises, holding 2 shields to protect itself. He orders the skeleton to protect him well. Whenever he uses his life drain, the young man praises his new servant for its excellent work and is very pleased with it. The scientist questions him, asking why he decided to create a skeleton this time. He explains that bones don't decay and that he can manipulate them however he wants. The alchemist is impressed that he even thought about the undead's maintenance. He says he needs to leave for a boring errand and asks the other to look after the servant. The alchemist asks, confused, where he's going at this time of night. He explains that he's going to the Pantheon to receive a holy spell because his level went up. The scientist is left completely speechless upon hearing that unexpected answer. He then panics and asks what on earth a holy spell means. Shocked, the partner asks if the young necromancer was a priest all along. The image of a priest skeleton appears behind him, reinforcing the doubt. With Kronos by his side, he says he's actually a very devout believer. The alchemist yells that's impossible, and the young man says the comment hurt his feelings. He changes the subject and asks if the patent for the healing potion has been registered yet. The scientist confirms, and the young man praises his speed, but he says he doesn't like to procrastinate. The partner explains that the problem is advertising, as the exhibition is not until next year. Hearing this, the hunter offers to promote the potions if he gets a chance. The alchemist agrees, and immediately hands him a vial of the new potion to take with him. With a wicked smile, the young man says they'll make a fortune if everything goes right. He then imagines himself swimming in money and says that cash makes the world go round in the end. His partner watches him and wonders if that guy is really a priest. The scene changes to the Pantheon, a tower that appeared after the Great Cataclysm. Inside, people gather to receive spells and blessings from the constellations. He walks through the place and thinks it's the gods who demand offerings from their followers. But he doesn't feel any divine presence and finds it strange that there are valuable items on the ground. The young man starts to get out of breath from the long climb in that place. He then complains that there are no escalators or elevators around. The hunter wonders if he needs to show devotion by climbing 108 steps. With Kronos by his side, he complains that this is really tough and that he's very tired. The god asks how much is left, and he says it's the same distance they've already climbed. Then the young man realizes they are only halfway to the top. He gets annoyed and thinks there had better be a good reward for all this effort. With no other choice, the young man continues to climb the long stone staircase of the Pantheon. He finally arrives in a huge hall with a ceiling that shows the stars. With a serious expression, the protagonist observes the sacred place with great attention. Several constellations show reactions, and little Kronos starts to laugh at the situation. The god then takes his true form and says it's now his turn to act. He then looks at the starry sky and prepares to show his power. With a touch, he registers the giant of the defiant heavens in the pantheon of gods. With that, the young man acquires the spells Unholy Blessing and Wedge of Retribution. The skills increase stats and damage and the young man says the power is very good. The ancient titan laughs proudly and boasts of his incredible divine greatness. But the system announces that the god's divinity is still weak and needs achievements. The star's light is faint, and the young man calls the system trash, making the god sad. Even so, he smiles because what matters is that he got stronger in the end. Soon after, the young man walks through the city streets with a very thoughtful look. He goes on his way calmly, observing the nightlife. Suddenly, a voice calls out to him and asks why he is leaving the Pantheon. A blonde, muscular guy named Shigeru Sadak appears and greets him. The hero looks at him with a confused expression and asks who he really is. The big guy says he looked after him at the orphanage and asks if he remembers now. The young man recognizes him as a piece of trash who used to shake down the other kids. A memory shows the bully holding him by the collar in an old room. He accuses him of having snitched on him to the director and threatens him angrily, but the young man retaliates with a powerful punch to the aggressor's face. Without hesitation, the hunter asks if his nose has healed yet, and the other guy gets furious at the taunt. The bully then calms down and says he almost lost his head for a moment. With a smile, he shows a shiny pin attached to his shirt. The item was the emblem of the famous and powerful Arageri guild from that region. He calls him a low-level hunter and warns that things won't be like they were before, but the young man stares back at him and says that for him, nothing has really changed. The big guy gets angry again and grinds his teeth in a rage at the young man. He then yells at the other not to be so arrogant and gets ready to attack him. With that, the bully moves forward and tries to grab him with his hand to intimidate him, but another man appears and grabs his wrist, stopping the surprise attack. The bully is surprised and tries to explain to his captain what happened. The newcomer then suggests they move to another location and have an official fight. In his thoughts, the man wonders why the young man picked a fight with the guild. The captain asks if they know each other and suggests they let their fists do the talking. The aggressor smiles and says the young man just became a hunter and that it's a joke. But to everyone's surprise, the protagonist accepts the challenge right away. The bully is confused, as he didn't expect him to accept so quickly. With a smirk, the young man asks if the other guy is scared of the fight. The aggressor grinds his teeth and yells that he can't take back what he just said. The scene then changes to the Arageri Guild's affiliated gym in a modern building. In the center of the arena, the two hunters face each other as the fight is about to begin. The young man says he's a priest and that his servant will fight in his place. The enemy scoffs at the summoned beast and shows off his necklace and ring that boost his stats. With a contemptuous look, he says his items won't give him any advantage. At that, the arena's system activates, and a symbol of light appears on the ground. With a smile, the blonde guy prepares for the battle that is about to start. The system announces that a barrier will protect the lives of both fighters, and the match begins. The arena is ready and the system activates for the fight to finally begin. With a smile, the system begins to measure the HP and defense of the hunters in range. It's announced that a barrier will be activated if anyone's life is in danger. The aggressor then mockingly asks if his opponent is scared of the fight. The young hero glares at him with disdain and wonders what on earth the other guy is talking about. Meanwhile, the creature thinks that he never imagined he would run into the Arageri Guild here. He then gets ready for battle, wanting to see how well his body can hold up. The creature states that against a member of Arageri, there's no reason to hold back, but the young man asks him not to end it all in one blow, because he wants to test something. The draconic servant then grumbles that holding back is harder for him now. Angrily, the bully shouts that he's going down, and that he'll show him his true place. He charges forward with everything he's got, and prepares a powerful strike with his spear to hit him, but the creature effortlessly blocks the enemy's attack, using only his foot. The aggressor is shocked to see the monster stop his special attack with ease. Unfazed, the blonde man retreats and prepares to use another one of his skills. With a wicked smile, he activates his second form for a piercing attack. Watching, the young man thinks that his servant's reaction time is better than before. The creature asks if the other guy thought such a slow attack could ever hit him. With incredible speed, the draconic one moves his hand to stop the blow again. He catches the enemy's spear with his hand, and the blonde man is in shock at the sight. The aggressor realizes he can't move and becomes paralyzed with pure fear. With contempt, the monster calls him pathetic for attacking without thinking about the next step. He then warns that if this were a real battle, the other guy would already be finished. The creature realizes he forgot what his master asked, and that he was supposed to hold back. But it was too late, and with his hand on his opponent's chest, he prepares to attack with everything. The servant then lands a powerful punch right in the enemy's face. The big guy screams in pain as he's sent flying by the strong impact. The monster says that he cried the last time he got his nose broken in a fight, but the young man comments that this time he only yelled for a second and that he's grown up. The aggressor gets up, filled with rage, and shouts that he's a scoundrel. Furious, the bully charges once more with his spear to attack the servant, but the creature blocks the blow with his foot again, without any difficulty. The impact of the block is so strong that it cracks the entire floor of the battle arena. Even so, the aggressor doesn't give up and prepares another attack with his spear. The monster says that if you use the same move twice, your opponent will read you like a book. With a quick spin, the draconic servant strikes the enemy's leg with his tail. The bone in the bully's leg breaks from the impact, and he feels immense pain. Wide-eyed, the aggressor is in shock at what just happened. The monster then says it's over and prepares for the final blow of the fight. He raises his hand to finish the fallen enemy and end the battle right there. With tears in his eyes, the blonde man understands that the fight is really over for him, but the captain appears and tells the servant to stop the attack before it's too late. The protagonist gets annoyed because his plan was interrupted in the middle of the fight. In his thoughts, he says that they arrived faster than expected. The system then announces the end of the match, with the aggressor down on the arena floor. The captain helps him and says he'll call a priest to heal him as quickly as possible. Just then, the young man appears and says that he already has a priest right there in front of him. The captain retorts that a one-star healing spell can't fix broken bones. He then asks how the young man plans to heal his injured companion. The young man takes out a vial and says he'll use a medium-grade potion to heal him. The other guy asks if he hasn't seen the news about the mass production of those potions. The bully shouts that he doesn't need any charity and tells the young man to leave. But the young man insists, thinking that he was looking for a way to advertise the potions. With a wicked smile, he says he found the perfect test subject right here. The young man then pours the red potion on the fallen enemy's broken leg. The captain is shocked because the blonde man was healed, and even his bones were mended. With a look of desire, he thinks that he really wants that potion for himself. The hero smirks because his plan to sell the potions worked out perfectly. The other man asks where he bought those mass-produced potions. The protagonist thinks with a smile that his opponent took the bait perfectly. The young man asks if, being a captain, he must be a 3-star hunter. With a smile, he challenges him to a fight and says he'll tell him where he got the potion if he wins. That the captain accepts as long as he reveals the source of the potion, regardless of the final outcome. The young man says the last fight was too short and that this time he'll fight with everything he has. With that, the two of them take their positions, and a new combat is about to begin in the destroyed arena. The system announces the start of the match, and the captain leaps to attack the servant at once. He uses his 5th form of swordsmanship and strikes the monster with a sharp attack. The man thinks it was impressive that the creature reacted to his swift blow, but he knows there's a speed limit for a body as large as that one. The system announces that the damage has lowered its defense, and the creature feels the pain from the blow. With that, the captain continues to attack the giant servant with his swift strikes. The protagonist watches the fight and thinks that it's going exactly as he had imagined. He understands that a speed-based fight is a terrible matchup for the draconic one, and that's why he used the potion as bait to provoke the guild leader. The creature decides to use the fight to get used to his new, heavy body. The young man praises his servant's attitude, calling him his right-hand man in the fight. He then says that in that case, He can't just stand by and watch the combat. With that, the young man casts Unholy Blessing to strengthen his servant in battle. The screen shows the unholy blessing that strengthens the undead and weakens others, and the young man is shocked by how strong the spell is. With that, a dark energy moves toward the guild captain, and the necromancer announces that it's time for the next step. The warrior is then caught by the spell and suddenly feels his body grow heavier, not understanding what's happening. Then, the system announces that his stats have decreased by 10% due to the curse, and the man is shocked by the situation. The captain wonders how a one-star hunter has a spell that strengthens allies and weakens enemies at the same time. Kronos then asks what he thought of the new power, and the young man says it was pretty good for a low-level constellation. The god gets angry at the comment, but the hunter tells him to be quiet, as they're in the middle of a serious battle. With a confident smile, the hero prepares to use his next ability in the fight. He activates the Wedge of Retribution, which stores up damage with every hit taken, and his servant is surrounded by spikes of energy. The master then gives his creature a new order, telling it to fight with everything it has and not to hold back anymore. The servant gets very excited and says that's the best order he's ever received as a giant shadow appears behind him. The captain charges forward with his swift strikes, hitting the monster squarely, and the system announces that retribution has been stored. The man thinks that a 3-star hunter like himself can easily get used to the reduction in his stats, but he's surprised to see the creature taking his attacks without any trouble. As the system continues to store the damage, the monster thinks that its body is now undead, and the damage will no longer affect its movements, so it changes its strategy. It decides to stop dodging and will take all the hits to turn the fight into a close-quarters battle. As soon as the captain approaches to attack, the creature grabs him firmly by the arm, stopping the sword strike. With the enemy caught in its grasp, the draconic servant prepares a powerful punch to finally counter-attack. The man uses his combat art and attempts a multi-hit strike to try and break free from the monster's grip. However, the creature's punch is faster and lands a direct hit, sending the warrior flying from the force of the impact. The captain soars across the arena, crying out from the incredible force of that direct attack. Lying on the ground, he sees that his health is dropped by half and can't believe a one-star summon is so strong. He then realizes that if he takes one more hit like that, the fight will be completely lost for him. Furious, the man refuses to lose to such a low-level hunter and prepares to fight with everything he's got. He believes his speed is still superior, and that summoners are always the weak point of the team. With that, he decides to ignore the servant and runs toward the master to end the fight once and for all. The necromancer remains still, watching the enemy approach without showing any sign of fear. The captain then uses his 12th form of swordsmanship and prepares a powerful piercing attack. The young man continues to watch the swift coming toward him with a very calm and composed look. In his thoughts, he says with a smile that he was expecting this desperate move from his opponent. The system announces that the Wedge of Retribution will be released, and the young man prepares for the counter-attack. He unleashes the stored energy, and a shockwave hits the captain head-on, sending the warrior flying. The system then announces that the opponent's health has reached 0. And the match finally ended right then and there. The scene changes to the large Arajeri Guild building on that same dark, starry night. Inside the building, we see a luxurious and very tidy office with a view of the city. On the desk, a nameplate shows the name of the vice-master of that powerful place. The man asks if it's true that they have medium-grade potions ready for mass sale. The captain, who was defeated in the arena, confirms the information for his superior with a serious look. The vice-master then questions if they checked the performance of the potions correctly. The young man explains that they healed a fracture instantly and are just like the ones found in gates. With a serious look, he confirms that the item's power is indeed very good and impressive. At that, the warrior apologizes to his superior for what happened earlier in the battle arena. The boss says the guild's name won't suffer just because a captain lost a simple fight. The man replies that the loss was to a no-name hunter with only 1 star. The vice Master becomes furious and says the guild's reputation isn't so fragile as to worry about that. Then he yells at the young man and tells him to stop talking nonsense about the guild's name. With that, the boss announces that the captain has been demoted to a regular member as punishment for the defeat. Shortly after, he orders his assistant to find out where those powerful potions came from. He then watches the recording of the fight and can't believe a 3-star hunter lost. The man wonders if the young man, who was a priest, managed to get a divine class summon. With that, he tells his assistant to investigate that young hunter as well to learn more about him. The woman agrees and prepares to carry out her boss's new orders immediately. Back in the arena, the protagonist thinks that the news of the potions has already reached the guild's top brass. He then calls over his draconic servant, who was nearby, to talk about a new plan. The creature holds a book of spear techniques and asks why it has to read that. The young man says the servant is a magic fighter, so he would be the perfect teacher to instruct him. The dragon complains about the task, but asks why his master suddenly became interested in spears. A memory of the blonde bully who used a spear to attack appears quickly on the screen. The hero explains that if things get rough, everyone will target him because he looks weaker. The servant laughs and tells his master to train more, since he looks weaker than his own minion. The protagonist gets annoyed by the taunt, and his eyes glow with an intense, menacing light. The servant then raises its fist and pretends its hand is moving on its own to throw a punch. With a bright flash, the creature lands a solid punch right in its master's face without any mercy. After the lesson, the monster says it has read the book and will now teach the young man how to fight with a spear. The creature then tosses the book to its master and tells him to memorize everything for the training as well. The young man catches the book in mid-air and holds it with a very serious and focused look on the magical object. The screen shows that the book teaches the Viridian family spear style, and that it's easy to learn. He remembers that the death spiral is a technique based on this style, and that it takes years to master. With a smile, he thinks this is a privilege of a regressor, and that he will use it to his advantage. The hunter then uses the skill book, and the system announces that the technique summary has been installed. He sees the 6 forms of the spear, and thinks they're simple, but he knows using them in combat is another story. The creature says teaching is its specialty, and strikes the ground with the spear to show its power. The young man watches his servant's every move with great attention to learn how to fight. The monster leaps and says you learn martial arts by getting hit and moving your body in practice. With that, it attacks with full force, and a large explosion of energy destroys the arena floor. The servant then lands in the middle of the destruction and asks its master what he thought of the training. The creature stands still with the spear in hand, waiting for the young man's next move in the arena. It praises the young man's dodge, but says his movements are still not good enough. The dragon warns that if he only dodges the strikes, he will never get used to using the spear. The young man complains that anyone would dodge a surprise attack, and that the servant is going too hard on him. The master asks if it's still angry, but the monster says this is just part of its instruction. It explains that this is real training against an enemy with harmful intent, and the young man falls silent. Without wasting time, the servant charges forward with its spear again to continue the intense training. But this time, the young man doesn't back down and yells for the monster to come at him with everything it has. With that, he activates the 3rd form of the spear, the rotational guard, and prepares for the blow. The young man successfully blocks the servant's attack, and the creature praises the move. He thinks that now he needs to attack, but notices that his training spear is cracking. The wooden spear then shatters into pieces upon colliding with the monster's stronger weapon. The master is hit squarely in the chest by the tip of his teacher's broken spear. With the strong impact of the blow, he cries out in pain as he's thrown backward, completely defenseless. He kneels with pain in his chest, but still holds the broken spear tightly, not giving up. At that moment, his servant says that taking the first hit doesn't mean the fight is over, and tells him to stay sharp. The young man doesn't understand why his defense didn't work if he managed to stop the monster's blow. The creature explains that he defended against the first attack, but forgot to prepare for the second one. The young man complains that the problem is the monster being stronger, but it denies this and says it adjusted its strength. Then the hunter gets up, determined, and says that next time he'll fight with everything he has. A blue aura surrounds him as he prepares for the next round of that intense training. With that, he activates the fourth form of the spear, the shaft strike, and goes on the attack against his teacher. He charges forward and attacks his teacher with a powerful blow, and the two clash in the middle of the arena. He thinks there wouldn't be a second strike, and that now he would counter-attack. But something goes wrong. The dragon then smiles confidently, as it had expected this move from its apprentice. The young man falls to the ground again, not understanding what happened during that surprise attack. The monster explains that he only thought about blocking the second hit and didn't defend against the first. He understands that the servant is right, and the system announces that the life drain is still active. The dragon then tells him to do it right this time and prepares to attack with full force. But the monster hits him in the face with a training weapon to teach a new lesson. The training continues, and the two now fight on the wall of the battle arena without a break. After a long training session, the scene changes to a busy city street at night. In a restaurant, we see pieces of meat grilling on a hot, steaming griddle. The leader of the hunter group asks the young man what happened to his bruised face. His face is all bruised, and he has a bump on his head from the intense training. The young man says a lot has happened, and his friend becomes concerned by the vague answer. The servant praises its master for fighting it without passing out and calls him impressive. The young man says the training was fun and that hitting someone without getting in trouble was great. It tells the monster to let him know when it wants to stop, but the young man says he won't give up. The hunter thinks that the life drain also strengthens his physical abilities, but he knows that just increasing his stats is a waste of his great potential. With a smile, he thinks he'll become stronger than he was before the regression by mastering the techniques. The friend gets scared by the young man's wicked expression as he talks to himself. The leader thanks him for the 15 million transfer, and the young man tells him to call on them again. The protagonist then asks his friend if there has been any news about hunters lately. The group leader says their colleague keeps an eye on a website and mentions a few cases. He also brings up a gate in Kagoshima and the serial incidents involving hunters. The young man thinks that he remembers the major incidents, but was hoping for something useful in the smaller ones. The friend then mentions another gate in a place called the Forgotten Temple. Surprised, the young man wonders if that place hadn't been cleared by anyone yet. His partner explains that the Horizon Guild has been failing to clear the place for almost a year. A cute image shows that they just defeat the monsters that appear from time to time. Another illustration explains that a gate break happens when the mana exceeds 100%. The hero then understands that it's a flow-type gate and becomes thoughtful about the information. His companion says that since the place is dangerous, the guild has opened entry to everyone. He mentions that famous guilds like Phoenix and Dawn have shown interest in the mission. The young man remembers that the Phoenix Guild obtained the dragon scale armor there. With a wicked smile, he thinks that gate hasn't been conquered by anyone yet. He plans to learn how to fight with a spear and get the armor, and his friend notices his strange look. The young man then stands up and tells them to let the others know about an important meeting tomorrow. The scene changes to the Forgotten Temple, with two dragon statues around the blue gate. The system shows that the gate is a fluid type and the mana is at 93%. The group arrives at the location and sees a large camp full of all kinds of hunters. One of the hunters explains that people from all over the country came here after it was opened. His friend asks if they're going to camp, but the young man says they'll stay inside the gate. The female hunter complains that 5 days worth of food isn't enough for such a big challenge. With confidence, the protagonist states that they will finish everything in just 5 days. One of his companions calls attention to someone arriving at the camp. A woman in armor walks past them. She is the next sword saint of the Phoenix Guild. The hero remembers that she was the one who discovered how to clear the gate and get the armor. He thinks that she was a genius but had an accident and lost everything in the past. His friend points to another person who is approaching the hunter's camp. A strong man in a kimono appears. He is Goda, a powerful member of the Dawn Guild. The fighter was known as the Iron Fist and was one of the strongest in all of Japan. He thinks that all the big names of the future are gathered there for that mission. His friend then asks if they can really beat all of them and clear the gate. The young man tells them not to worry about the others and that they will go at their own pace. With a wicked smile, he thinks he's going to take the temple and the armor no matter what. The young man then starts running toward the gate, and the group shouts for him to wait. The system announces that they have entered the Forgotten Temple, and they see a place in ruins. The necromancer extends his hand, and his ring glows as he prepares to summon his servants. With a puff of green smoke, the dragon appears beside its master for the new mission. His partner is impressed to see the young man turn spirits into undead. The female hunter confesses she was afraid he would turn them into zombies too. With a serious look, the young man says he doesn't just turn anyone into an undead like that. The servant says that at their level, they would only become decent zombies, and the group is shocked. The protagonist then tells everyone to stop with the useless worries in focus. Suddenly, the ground begins to shake, and the temple's columns start moving on their own. The walls and structures of the place move and shift, creating a new labyrinth. The dragon warns that the terrain is changing and asks if it's safe for them. The young woman remembers that the place's difficulty is due to this unique temple mechanic. She explains that the layout changes once a day, and the environment and monsters reset. The hunter thinks that the mechanic is the same as before his regression, with no changes. He then tells his servant that it's right and uses his spells to strengthen it. The dragon says that protecting its weaker master is its duty, and that he doesn't need to worry. With that, the group enters the temple ruins to begin exploring the dangerous place. The creature warns that there's something strange up ahead, and the group goes on high alert. A strange figure with priest's robes and monster feet appears in the darkness. A fallen cultist with a demon mask emerges to attack the temple's invaders. The group leader recognizes the enemy and says they are fallen cultists from the temple. The creature charges forward with a wicked laugh, lunging at the group with its sharp claws. The draconic servant then moves forward and blocks the monster's attack with its own claws. The partner says that the cultists are strong and that they should help in the battle, but the dragon grabs the enemy's face with force, stopping it from moving another inch. With a powerful grip, he crushes the cultist's head in his hands without hesitation. The monster's mask shatters, and it is defeated with just one blow from the creature. The servant throws the enemy's body to the ground and prepares for the next attack from the monsters. With a powerful punch, it finishes off another cultist that was trying to attack the group of hunters. The group leader is impressed by the draconic servant's incredible strength in battle. The monster then says it was an easy victory and proudly flexes its muscles. The master complains that if it crushes their heads, he can't turn them into zombies. Meanwhile, several other cultists appear to attack the group inside the temple. The creature complains that the monsters keep showing up and interrupting their exploration. The young man grabs his skull staff and says he'll join the battle this time. The system announces that the staff's effect has been applied and the magic cost has been reduced. With that, he uses bone control, and several spikes shoot out from the enemy's bodies. The cultists are hit squarely by the magic and fall to the ground, defeated by the attack. One of the monsters is pierced through the chest, and dark energy completely surrounds it. He thinks that the cultists have low resistance to dark and holy attributes. The enemy's speed decreases, and they become slower due to the unholy magic. The servant doesn't understand why they got slower, but its own stats have increased. It then charges forward and attacks the cultists more easily, thanks to the training it had. The creature uses its fists to defeat several monsters at once without difficulty. The bodies of the cultists fall to the ground, and the path is clear for the group to advance. The young man remembers to use Life Drain to recover his energy after the fight. The servant complains that without it, its master wouldn't even have the Life Drain ability. With its arms crossed, the dragon brags and complains that it didn't even get a thank you. The protagonist gets annoyed and misses the time when his servant was quieter. With that, he levels up to 20 and the system announces that new knowledge has been recorded. He learns Dark Wisdom and Dark Realm, which reduce the cost of his spells. He thinks these are the perfect skills for the 5-day siege on the temple. The young man then uses his necromancy on the bodies of the fallen cultists on the temple floor. The system announces that the completion rate for the armored zombies is extremely high. His partner asks if the zombies will be stronger, and the young man says the enchantments matter. The group leader doesn't understand a thing the young man said and has a puzzled look on his face. He then explains that the difference in raw stats isn't that big in the end. With that, the young man says they need to speed up the search because the temple goes much deeper. The group continues their journey through the seemingly endless interior of the temple. The draconic servant charges forward and faces more cultists that keep appearing along the way. Meanwhile, the team leader blocks a powerful blow from a cultist with his shield. The group's archer also springs into action, firing an arrow of golden energy. The necromancer's new armored zombies also advance into combat without any fear. The young man gets annoyed because the monsters seem endless and just keep coming. At that moment, the entire floor of the place begins to shake unexpectedly and frighteningly. His companion warns that the layout is changing and they need to get out of there fast. But the protagonist tells him to wait, as he remembers something important about the place. He recalls an interview with the hunter who cleared the temple for the first time. In the memory, the reporter asks the woman how she managed to clear that gate. The warrior explains that a special method is needed to reach the final boss. She reveals that there are 3 types of monsters, and each one drops a different symbol. According to her, if you collect 49 of them and place them on a pillar, something happens. With that, the hunter gains access to the room where the boss monster of that place resides. The protagonist then recognizes the eye pattern on a pillar and understands that it's the next one.